everyone. Welcome to Module 5. For Module 5, you're going to be completing Chapters 13, 14, and 15. You're going to have Discussion Board number 3, and you're going to have the MyEconLab work as well for Chapters 13, 14, and 15. For this week, I got some interesting resources for you. I have the PowerPoint slides with some teaching summaries. I also have the ancillary materials as well. And in the ancillary materials, I got some practice quizzes for you and some important videos and resources that you can review as well. Make sure with the discussion board that you have an APA formatted in-text citation and reference, 3 to 4 paragraphs, and have your first post by the first Thursday of the module. If you can focus on those requirements, it will definitely help with your effort as I look forward to your participation in the discussion board. So let's go over Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is going to be looking at monopolies, and monopolies are going to be looking at some key barriers. A monopoly is a firm that has large market powers, and they are a single firm that operates and blocks entry into competition. So no competition is allowed in the market given the role of monopolies. A pure monopoly is an industry with a single firm that produces a product for which there are no close substitutes, and there are very significant barriers to entry and prevent others from entering the industry, and it struggles for them to compete for profits. When you look at a monopoly, a lot of people get this confused. A monopoly is not a firm that is in a small town like a Walmart that has no competition. A monopoly is a government-regulated firm that operates. So that is something that you need to focus on in your analysis. When we look at a monopoly and the barriers to entry, there's going to be some boundaries that exist. You'll notice that a monopoly that has no close substitutes. And when there's no close substitutes, that will create a lot of challenges for markets. Markets will be classified as what we call a price maker. And when they're a price maker, price makers mean that they will be able to set the prices in the market. A monopoly will be facing a downward sloping demand curve. It'll look just like this. Demand curve right here. Marginal revenue curve will always be below the demand curve. A monopoly, when we look at a monopoly graph, you need to focus on where MR equals MC right here. That's the profit maximizing point. This is where you draw the vertical line up. You want to find where it hits the demand curve, and you also want to find when it hits the demand curve, that will be the price that will be charged in the market. And from this price, now we need to find where does it hit the ATC curve. Where it hits the ATC curve is the cost. We want to see the level of profit. And the level of profit is going to be the shaded area right here. This point right here really doesn't have anything more than just showing us the profit maximizing point. And the line where we draw a vertical line of the profit maximizing point. So you notice the price is $6. You notice we're producing 5 units and we're making it for $4.50. So 150 times 5 gives us the total amount of profit available in the market. Now, when we look at perfect competition, last week you'll notice that perfect competition has a horizontal demand curve where MR equals MC. When we look at this horizontal demand curve, you notice that perfectly competitive firms are facing a lot of challenges in markets. And the reason why we're facing this horizontal demand curve is firms are classified as what we call price taker. In monopolies, they're classified as a price maker. Now, when we compare a perfectly competitive firm to a monopoly, we have to compare them a little bit differently. Remember, the demand curve and marginal revenue curves for a monopoly are different. Marginal revenue curve will always be below the demand curve. However, when we look at this, right here's the level of output that we're producing at for a monopoly, because this is the this is the profit maximizing point. We go to where it hits the demand curve. Now, in a perfectly competitive curve, demand equals marginal revenue right here. So this demand and marginal revenue is for the monopoly, but demand equals marginal revenue right here. So now we have to find MR equals MC, which is going to be right here. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So for a perfectly competitive firm, it'll always be the same. You'll notice that a monopoly will charge a higher price compared to a perfectly competitive firm, and monopolies will produce less output compared to a perfectly competitive firm. These two instances are where there's lack of efficiency that's available in the market, and that's very important to evaluate. When we look at the market, monopolies will always be producing a lower output and producing at a higher price. Now let's go to the next chapter. Now let's look at an oligopoly market structure. An oligopoly market structure is a market structure that's focused on few firms that are dominant in the market. They sell very similar products. A good example of an oligopoly would be the airline industry. And we look at the airline industry, you notice that they are very focused on the challenges faced in our economy. And the airline industry has a lot of different levels of competition, and these different levels of competition creates a lot of challenges in terms of how prices are being made and how prices are being set up, and that's very important to evaluate. You have 5 forces model when we look at this. When we look at industry competition, we got potential entrants into the market, we got suppliers, we got buyers, and we got the substitutes that are available. These are the markets that we're facing and the challenges that these markets will be facing. And these are the 5 driving industry competitive levels. Now look at this. When we look at the percentage of value shipments accounted for by the largest firms, you'll look at the largest 4 firms right here. When we look at the largest 4 firms, you notice the cigarette makers, they make up about 95%, the largest 4 firms. There's about 15 total firms in the market, but they make up the largest 4, 95% of the market. When that's a large amount, those 4 firms are going to watch each other. And when they watch each other, you notice that they're going to make a lot of decisions on what the prices are going to be established. And they're going to see how other firms are operating to figure out the best value for their company as well. You also look at household equipment. You got 93% of the largest 4 firms. You have breakfast cereals. You have 82% of them. That's a big amount. And these big amounts create a lot of challenges in our economy. And then what happens is when you have these large amounts, these firms will have much higher prices that are available. And given the higher prices, they have to face challenges on how to solve for these instances. Now, price fixing. When you have very few firms in the market, you will notice that price fixing will be something that will be prevalent. Price fixing is a criminal offense. All firms who do business on U.S. soil are subject to U.S. antitrust laws, regardless of where their owners live. You know, in September of 2012, a company passed a $500 million, or company paid $500 million in fines to the government and was sentenced to 3 years in jail for price fixing on their business. And the reason why price fixing involved in this market was there was not much competition. And when there's very little amount of competition present, firms will watch each other and firms will come together to agree upon the best price in the market. Now, when we look at oligopoly models, we're going to look at a cartel. A cartel is a group of firms that get together and make joint price and output decisions. But they're looking at the output levels. Now, tactic collusion is where firms are tactically coming together to make agreements. And these fixing agreements among producers are very explicit in the decisions that they have to make. Collusion can be illegal if you come together to make pricing decisions, but most people are focused on the role of output in the decisions that they have to make. So that's what we're focusing on, the role of output. And these oligopoly models are very important to focus on because oligopolies will help an economy be able to prosper because you're able to set aside the output levels that you've agreed upon. So these are some of the resources, some of the concepts we're covering for this week. If you need any additional resources or you need any additional help, please let me know, as I'm more than willing to support whatever you need. But I look forward to your effort this week.